family, nice of you to join us. Tonight's meeting. Next is our Historical Society documentation. Brian, you want to take away with this?
Do I read anything or?
Does Brian read anything? No.
No.
You want to explain what you
Okay.
The Historical Society, which has been working so hard, and it's great workers, and they finally moved over to out of the gym and over to 9th Avenue, where they were before the floods came. And a lot of times, people would ask me questions about Belmar, and sure, I grew up in Belmar. My grandparents owned summer homes, both sets, in the 1890s. My parents moved to Belmar full-time in the 1940s. I had a big family, so I had 8 siblings, so I knew a lot of people. But this was the secret to how much I knew about Belmar. When we moved from the old municipal building on 8th Avenue and Highway 35, we had to bring everything from there over to here. And in some boxes were some books. And I just happened to pick up this book. This is the book of Belmar. And I started reading, and I brought it back to the gym, and I would read it. It was amazing. It was written by a gentleman named William Bamford. He used to be a mayor of Belmar, but this is just a treasure of information of Belmar from 1872 into the 1920s. And I got a call from the mayor asking me about the boardwalk. And I said, well, I know a little bit about the boardwalk, but he goes, do you have any documentation? And it's been 10 years since I saw this book as recreation director, and I thought back, the only way we could get documentation is if I could find the Bamford book. And I asked the members, Pat O'Keefe and Naomi Reasoner, if they had it, if I had given it to them before I retired. And they said, no, what are you talking about? I said, ooh, you don't know about the Bamford book. And so I went and I found it upstairs. And because this is so valuable, I don't think we should just leave it upstairs anymore. I want to present it to the Belmar Historical Society, who's worked so hard in the preservation of Belmar's history, and now you have documentation of just about everything. So Naomi, can you come on up here? This book right here is the holy grail for Belmar history. This gentleman, William Bamford, I can't believe it was all typed on a typewriter. And it's just absolutely amazing how much he did. And Naomi, to the Historical Society to take care of, and anything you need when people call you up and ask you anything about Belmar from 1872 to about 1920, 1921, it's right there.
Thank you, Brian. Not many people know the name Bamford, but the people who work at the archives at the museum know it because a good deal of the collection that exists is because of this man. He was a passionate saver, a meticulous record keeper, and he will be able to fill in the blanks as to the keys to Belmar's history. Thank you.
One thing I can't understand is he had so much history, and my dad was an encyclopedia of Belmar history, and there's no Bamford family in town that we've ever been able to come across.
Well, he was a bachelor.
That explains why it is. All right, I know it.
He died in 1945. He lived at 614 10th Avenue.
614 10th Avenue.
And there isn't any 614 10th anymore.
That's right next to you, Tom?
So there is no 614 anymore. There was then. I guess it's Taylor's driveway. There's no house, there's no family.
Okay.
But he was an avid record keeper, as this book details, and from the collection that we already have in the family. He left some to the Monmouth County Historical Association when he died, some to Belmar, some to Princeton. He was a graduate of Princeton. And it's going to be good reading. Anything else you find upstairs?
Actually, we'll make an appointment. We do have our minute books that go back to Ocean Beach minutes, so I'll show that to you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I want to know what a typewriter is.
You might want to know what it is.
Our next presentation is a resolution honoring an outstanding teacher at Belmar Elementary School. And I'd like Superintendent Holman to come up with me as well. And also like to bring up Terry Hennessy. Oh, I had Terry.
It's a long story.
Okay, we'll go with Maria. So this is honoring Maria Teresa Hennessy on her retirement from employment at Belmar Elementary School. Whereas Maria was born in Phoenix, raised there, and back from the Pacific Front.
My dad was
New Guinea.
in the army. And let me
Sure.
here's my story. Now, I was born in Arizona, although my family was originally from Elizabeth, New Jersey. My dad was in the Army Air Corps, and he was stationed in New Guinea and came back to my mom and my older brother, who he hadn't seen, actually. And so I was conceived and born in Arizona while he was still in the Army. And we were there pretty much till the end of the war. Then we came back to Elizabeth. Then we moved to Rahway in '55. And by the way, I'm number 2 of 10 kids. They did tell my dad, he got injured in the war. They did tell him he probably wouldn't have any more children. But he came back and had 9 more. Anyway, I graduated Rowley High in '62, went to work for the phone company, got married early, had my 4 children, moved to Belmar in 1975, July 4th. July 4th, I think 39 years, yeah. Went back to school, got my degrees, and Belmar Elementary hired me in 1989, January, and at the same time, the Borough of Belmar hired me as the welfare director. I worked 2 days a week in each assignment. At the end of 1890, no, I'm sorry, 89, numbers, they decided through the state that we needed a full-time social worker. I'm a school social worker. And so I was hired to be the full-time school social worker, and I've been there ever since. I was there this morning, Mr. Holman. I'm not supposed to be there, but I was there. And I loved every minute of it. But I would like to mention that my husband, Dan, would you say that? He's the wind behind my wings. And he came along in 1988. And we were married in '91. By the way, I did have a 5th child back then, before Dan. I had 5 children. Lisa Grace was born here, actually, in Belmar. So that's my story, and thank you.
Hold on a second. Yeah, it's all verified. So,
Yes.
Superintendent Holman, you want to say a few words?
Terry exemplifies the ideal social worker from the staff. Terry, thank you very much. You're a very calming influence. And if we have stress, we come into your office and you calm us, which helps us with the children. But most importantly, from the children, especially the children with special needs. And I have a child with special needs, and as I said this in your retirement party, it's difficult when you're sitting at a meeting and you have a child with special needs and you have to trust someone. And I wish you were my daughter's social worker, and if you were sitting across the table, I know that I could trust you. And when you think of a social worker, the definition is yours. Thank you very much for your time.
Next resolution is honoring someone who does an outstanding service for our community. Every Thursday, we read her work. Let's bring up Haley Beck. This is designed to embarrass. This is honoring Haley Beck. Whereas, for the past 24 months, Haley Bear has been reporting on all the activities and events in the borough of Belmar for the Co-Star newspaper. And whereas during this time, Haley has written weekly articles about the mayor and council meetings, zoning and planning board meetings, the beach, recreation, library activities and events, as well as other volunteer groups, events, activities throughout the borough of Belmar. And whereas Haley has always been cooperative and willing to write about anything that would promote Belmar, as well as anything happening in Belmar. And whereas Haley has decided to resign from the Co-Star to pursue her master's degree at Carnegie Mellon University in Pennsylvania. Where she'll never write about us. Whereas the borough of Belmar is extremely grateful for all of her hard work and many hours she spent attending events and meetings, and that's absolutely true. I mean, she'll stay here at planning board, zoning board meetings till midnight, and she doesn't get paid by the hour. Now, therefore, be resolved by the mayor and council and all the employees and residents of the borough of Belmar to say thank you to Haley for your dedication and interest in Belmar, and wish you well in all your future activities. The other presentation we had today was for Ms. Jane Preble, who's also a employee a teacher at Belmar Elementary School, who's also retiring. Unfortunately, she can't be with us, so we're just going to give it to Mr. Hallman to bring back to her, but please give her our very best as well. All right? Thank you. Next is our workshop discussion. First item on it is going to be the Cleary Park Playground. Colleen wants to go through that for the council.
Sure, and I have some designs here I'll show the council, and then maybe I'll put out in the lobby so that folks can look at it. This is an extremely generous contribution to the borough of Belmar in the form of a playground from the Ed Brown estate. Ed Brown, as many of you know well, better than I, has a strong, obviously, affiliation with Belmar and the airport out in Wall. And he wanted to bequeath to Belmar a new playground that is estimated at over $300,000. The location of this playground will be at the Cleary Park. It will replace the existing play structure that is there that has gotten a little older for wear and tear over time. You'll see it resembles both an actual airplane and portions of an airport. So it's a new poured rubber surface, so we won't have our nightmarish mulch issues there anymore. Creates a more uniform play area. We expect fabrication to wrap up in early September. Our public works is going to be doing the demolition and grading of the existing site, then making room for the installation, which is also donated through the estate. So this is just a really fabulous playground that's going to hit our neighborhood by early fall, mid-fall.
So early fall, mid-fall this year.
Yes.
And what is our Department of Public Works involved in all? Do they just have to take out what's existing?
So basically taking out what's existing, removing some railroad ties. We were able to walk the site with Councilman Blackburn and Councilman McGovern to be sure that it's structured in such a way that we are not removing any additional trees, so we don't expect to have to lose anything additional at this point. And essentially going to take Public Works about a week to make the site ready, and then the installation will start probably the second or third week in September.
Did we award the tennis courts?
Yes, it's within pretty much the existing footprint.
So it's sort of similar to the playground that was donated to Belmar Elementary School when it comes to the surface and things like that.
Yes, that surface would be a great thing to picture when you consider it.
Well, you knew.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know how well people here in Belmar knew Ed Brown. I've known him slightly for about probably 35 or 40 years. He was well known in aviation here in New Jersey. He loved aviation. Most of us that fly absolutely do. And when Brian and I got a phone call about 4 or 5 months ago from Ken Pringle that the Brown family came to him and wanted to donate a playground to Belmar, I was ecstatic. And then when I saw it, I was really ecstatic. I think it'll be wonderful for the children. Brian and I do have plans that look like this at home, but go into a little bit more detail. It should make noise for the kids when they push things. I think they will really enjoy it. And there's no way we can thank the Brown family enough for this. And I do thank Ken Pringle for bringing that to us also. I can't wait.
Great.
Okay, again, mid to end of.
Mid-10.
I just want to say that I sat with Jim Morano and Brian Gates from Morano Recreation, and they said this is the only playground in the country that looks like this. They went to the drawing boards and did it for Ed Brown, and Jim said this is state-of-the-art equipment that they're using, and the price, like you said, $300,000 donation. I mean, it's just knocks you over. Yeah, knocks you over.
Colleen, I haven't had a chance to get up there, but the toddler playgrounds, are they in place?
They are not in place yet, but installation will be happening over the next week, I would say.
Yeah, we're installing where the existing playgrounds are on the boardwalk. We're installing toddler-size playgrounds at each one. And we kind of went and mapped it out, so it's a great addition to what's there.
All right, thank you. Next is Lake Como Health Club. We have our engineer here, DPW. I know we have some members of the public who live in that general area. I know Mr. Tyler's been very involved in this as well. So this is something that was done at their request, but also smart to do as far as bringing everyone up to date where we are on the Lake Como outflow pipe. So Colleen, you want to
Sure, I'd be happy to.
lead our presentation?
We wanted to have a conversation for you to have during workshop this evening on the Lake Como flood mitigation effort. I thought as a basis to at least start the conversation, I've circulated to members of council. This may look familiar to many of you. This is the initial proposal to mitigate flooding on Lake Como. This was submitted to the County of Monmouth and to FEMA when the call for grant initiatives for the hazard mitigation project opened in February 2013. At that time, the project consisted of replacement of the existing outfall pipe, which is a 24-inch ductile iron pipe running from the lake bottom, for lack of a better word, from where the structure is, out into the Atlantic Ocean. It also included the installation of a pump-out pad and an emergency outlet pipe, which would allow for pumping of severe flooding events or to drain the lake in the advance of a coming storm. And part C of this proposal was to increase the lake capacity and regrade the banks. This was a mixture of dredging and creating a berm, actually, that would, yes, create additional capacity for storage within the lake bounds, but does present other challenges, which I can touch on later when you talk about building berms and catch basins and things of that sort. This was a $1.5 million grant proposal. The borough submitted it, even though we are not the owners of the pipe, but we felt it important to get this grant in the pipeline and make sure that the county and state hazard mitigation folks knew that at least a solution had been begun to be engineered and was conceived of. A lot has happened since then. We are now, I believe it's 19 months post Sandy. We have been working with our partners, Lake Como and Spring Lake, on the flooding effort there, one of the first actions to take place you all voted on, which was the creation of the interlocal agreement that established a protocol for how to get pumps to the lake head in a time of emergency. There's also been a fair amount of work done by the Borough of Spring Lake since the storm, which I can talk about in a little bit of detail. Initially, there was a repair of 200 linear feet of the existing outfall. That happened in 2013. That was at a project cost of $220,000. We also installed 4 gooseneck pipes under Ocean Avenue. This was, you see them when you drive down Ocean Avenue, you can see the gooseneck kind of sticking up out of the ground. This was extremely important because it allowed us, when we did need to pump, to not close down Ocean Avenue and allow for a much faster hookup to couple to those goosenecks. Additionally, this work is just wrapping up now. An additional 100 feet of the existing outfall is being replaced at a cost of about $150,000. And at the same time, Spring Lake has extended 2 18-force mains from the goosenecks, for lack of a better way to describe it, out to the high tide mark. That allows us to essentially create an emergency pump out site where those pipes under the sand right now are capped. When we bring in a pump that we're going to hook into at the gooseneck, we would dig out the bottom of the force main, take off the caps, and pump into the ocean. That is the essential emergency operation that happened prior to the storm where we would close down Ocean Avenue. The work to date, and I really must illustrate that this work, because it is owned by Spring Lake, and all the land we're talking about is owned by Spring Lake, the work has been completed by Spring Lake, right now at an approximate $500,000 mark. They have project worksheets with FEMA for the vast majority of that. There will be a 10% local share that's left after all is said and done, and the 3 boroughs have agreed to share that remaining cost. Spring Lake has agreed to shoulder the initial expense, get the FEMA reimbursement, and then, for lack of a better way of putting it, true up with Lake Como and Belmar when all final invoices are in. There still is additional work to be performed, and especially when you take a look at the initial flooding mitigation project, not much, but a good deal of the work detailed in this flooding mitigation project has been accomplished on an emergency basis as portions of the existing outfall failed and pipe was replaced. So right now, approximately 300 feet of the existing outfall has been replaced with ductile iron, and it is operating very well. I encourage everyone to swing by Lake Como right now as just a good example of what a working outfall pipe does. That lake is very low, almost a little low, but that's what that working outfall does. It drains that water out very quickly. Remaining work that we know we need to do towards the mitigation project is the installation of a concrete pad that will allow us a cleaner place to put emergency pumps when they are brought in. We would like to install a sluice gate at the top of the outfall. So that's really, if you think of where the pipe enters into the lake, there would be, and Paul can jump in and correct me anytime I'm really messing up the engineering, we would install a sluice gate, which essentially stops the ocean from coming back in, which is a big problem on this lake. The ocean does like to flow back into Lake Como, which doesn't help anything that we're trying to do in terms of lowering the lake or reducing flooding. Having that ocean just rush in defeats the purpose. The sluice gate would be a lot like, kind of like a check valve in my mind, that would stop that action coming in from the ocean, but allow the drainage out to sea. And in addition, we are in conversation with the county. All 3 partners are in conversation with the county to perform spot dredging, similar to what they did in, I could point to the, I believe it's Fletcher Lake, Breck Pond, Fletcher Lake, over in Bradley. Which, again, that doesn't really help your emergency preparedness so much. What it does is it increases a better environment, it's a better quality of water. You are giving the lake bed kind of a new life as you take some of the sediment and silt out and allows for a healthier lake to live. But we are in conversation with Monmouth County to do that spot dredging and the remaining landscaping and grading of the site. You notice I didn't mention the berm specifically right now, which we can have a more in-depth conversation about. The creation of a berm does create more storm capacity within the lake in a very high storm event. Yes, it does. But the additional challenges it presents, and I want to detail because it is included in this plan that you see the grant written for, is that if you think of where along our residential streets that border the lake, there are catch basins every block or so. The intent of those catch basins are to allow stormwater runoff on your streets to flow into the lake. If you build a nice, very high berm, the opposite happens. As the lake rises above street level, you can see a rush of water out of those catch basins into your streets. So what you need to do is design essentially check valves on all of those catch basins to ensure that that reverse flooding doesn't happen. Is it possible? Yes. Can it fail? Yes. And again, I can defer to Paul if you'd like additional detail on that. That's why I kind of left that out as an area that we're not concerned about.
Does it also affect the water table, those first surrounding residents? Is that something, after Sandy, I heard stuff like that, and I wasn't too sure.
We all over town and in the entire region have seen a vastly increased water table level post-Sandy.
But having that higher, that doesn't.
Not necessarily.
Yeah, that's good, because some people notice that, the lake might not overflow, but the basement's flooded.
Correct.
And they would think, well, the reason why my basement's flooded is because of all the water in the lake. But really, it's just because we have a very high water table, and it's going to take a while to figure it out. Is that, Paul, you want to?
That's correct.
You want to stand up?
Sure.
Does that?
Yeah, by increasing the size of the banks for more storage capacity, it does not raise the water table. What you're seeing is during a storm is the ground saturates first. Once the ground saturates, that's the water that gets into the lake and goes into the streams, goes into the catch basins, unless it's on asphalt. So your groundwater is going to raise in large rain events, prolonged rain events. And that's why when it rains, you sometimes turn.
While you're up, any other engineering aspects that the council should know about, and some of the residents that are here as far as the project that's ongoing, working with Spring Lake, how's that going, working with their engineer? They're the ones designing it, are you consulting on it, or just tell us the interaction?
Yes, Spring Lake has been doing some repairs to the outfall, and I've been in discussions with Avakian engineers on what their repairs are to date.
Well, Avakian is the engineer.
Avakian is the engineer for Spring Lake. And so far, like Colleen had stated, they have replaced a good portion of the outfall pipe that was damaged. And once that repair is done, the water can drain out of the pipe much better.
And what's the size of the outfall pipe?
Current outfall pipe is 24 inches.
Does it make much of a difference if instead of 24 that was 36?
It would make a difference in a low tide event when the tide is down. It would make a difference, in terms of getting water out faster. If you have a high tide situation and rain's going into the lake, then no, because the pipe cannot push past. What it does is helps drain the lake faster. That is what the larger pipe would accomplish.
Okay. Is there any reason why when I say we, I mean the combination of us and Spring Lake and the company, why it's decided by the engineer in Spring Lake to stick with a 24-inch as opposed to a 36-inch?
I do not know why they would stick with the same size, except that it's, right now it's a repair project. They've not extended the pipe to the ocean, which is the expensive portion of the job. So if you were to make that 36 upland and still have the 24-inch in the ocean, you don't really gain anything. So you have to do the whole pipe, even upsize.
Okay. Are there any plans, does Spring Lake have any plans to upsize the whole thing?
Not that I'm aware of.
And if I could, a question for Director Campbell. Sorry, put you on the spot, Mike. But obviously DPW directed before Sandy, during and after. The 24-inch pipe now, before Sandy, how is that working relative to how it's working today? So in other words, is water moving quicker now that it's been repaired, or is it
Water,
the same?
they were able to lower the lake much easier now that all the repairs are made. Even before Sandy, that was not working properly because it was not maintained properly. There were still problems with the outflow pipe. Right now, it's repaired. It is moving out quickly. We were down there today. The lake is very low, they're able to lower it pretty much at will now. In preparation, again, we're having an event coming up in a couple of days, a rain event, and we've been on that with Spring Lake. In fact, we've made arrangements for a pump to come tomorrow, either through the county. I spoke with Monmouth County Public Works Director, John Padilla, today. We're hoping to get one from him because it's much cheaper. But if he cannot give us one, let us know first thing in the morning. We did contact our company that we have on our reserve, and they'll bring it down tomorrow at that point. But again, it is working better. There's more work needs to be done yet.
And the pump that we have, I guess it's on call, you want to say, that's part of the interlocal agreement we have, where we pay a certain amount of money every year just to have it on call, whether we use it or not?
Actually, we're still negotiating with Monmouth for the cost of the on-call pump. This is our relationship with them on a daily basis.
Okay, gotcha. But eventually, we're gonna
Yes.
move to a point where we just have it on call and we're able to bring it in.
Doesn't make sense to really own a pump for this purpose.
Right, no, I remember talking about that, the maintenance on it. We would use it. And I've been down to the lake today as well. I ran by it. And, you can see the ground. You can see the bottom of the lake in certain areas. So
Very low.
it's about as low as it can probably get.
And in fact, just a full disclosure, we are bringing the pump because Director Campbell and I talked when we saw the storm was coming and the potentiality. Right now the lake is so low, it would be actually hard to draw anything out of that lake. But we felt it important to get the pump here just in case the rainfall is as significant as expected and we need to assist the outfall and discharging post-event. So that's part of the logic there. Folks are looking at a pretty dry lake, wondering why we're bringing the pump because the water may still come.
And so just walk us through the logistics of this. Pump comes from the pump company. Who installs it at the lake?
It'll be played by the company, we will.
So Belmar Department of Public Works hooks up with the hoses.
Yes.
Spring Lake has nothing to do with it?
No, that's not accurate. We contacted them today, they're concerned, they're monitoring also. I'm sure they'll offer manpower as they always do.
Okay.
But we are making sure there's a pump there.
I guess my point is, we're gonna be responsible for it. It's not as if we're waiting for Spring Lake to hook it up. They don't hook it up and.
This is on us.
They're monitoring work, this is on us, we decided to make a call.
All right, anything else you wanted to add, Paul? For council?
Nothing in particular. Like you said, we have the application to FEMA. Hopefully it gets funded. I guess any improvements we can make to the outfall would help with the flooding situation. As we've seen, Spring Lake has repaired the outfall, so it's operating properly. As Dr. Campbell brought up, that I did not bring up, that yes, the pipe was damaged before Sandy, so it was not operating to full capacity. I'm sure it's operating much better now.
Okay, and you're seeing that in the real world, right? That it is working.
Yes.
Paul, I have a question. During a storm, where does most of the water that comes into Lake Como come from?
It comes from upstream.
Which is
It
where?
comes down through Wall.
Wall, and so most of the water that comes into Lake Como,
Comes from
flooding
the
it, comes from Lake Heights and Wall Township.
That's
Is there
correct.
anything they can do to slow up the water coming into Lake Como so that our pumps can get ahead of this? Any water retention basins?
I mean, certainly they could. I mean, things such as, larger pipes, flatter pipes to slow down the water coming downstream. As you brought up, underground detention.
We can't catch that water coming into Lake Como and just shoot it right out. It all comes in at that west end by Main Street, right?
The lake operates in a lot of ways. One way, it aids in water quality, to clean the water before it discharges into the ocean. And the lake also adds to slow down the amount of volume. It has a storage capacity, so it grabs the water, so you don't have a flooding event. Like if you would turn and pipe that system before the lake, the potential of that backing up is pretty substantial.
Colleen, last time we had the county pump there, and they came and took it just as it rained. Is there anything we can make sure that they don't do that again?
I have the keys.
You have the keys, okay. We had pump, then we had no pumps, because they said they needed it, right? So we can keep it this
Yep.
toxic.
What's the lifetime of the underground pipe for Spring Lake? Like how long, obviously it was broken before the storm. Any idea how long it took to break?
How long it took to break?
Yeah, for instance, it was in there 10 years and it broke after 5, it was in there 50 years.
Oh, no, that pipe's been in there, I don't want to venture a guess on how, but it's been like 50 years.
1988.
Yeah,
Was that?
1988.
1988, there was a repair, but the outfall into the ocean is much older than 1988. So, yes, so the pipe had been repaired in 1988, but the area that, you know, took the substantial portion of the damage was the older pipe. That was up near the well pump.
And it was all replaced.
Yes.
Another question. I remember, and we've talked about this for a while, we always talk about SMRSA. Is it just clear that SMRSA is not involved whatsoever in this?
no,
No, it's very thorough. Thank you, Colleen.
Any other, oh,
The only thing I have is I'm sure that once everything is fixed, obviously no one is watching it over the years, and it is on Spring Lake's property, so it should have been them. I would assume in the future, we will be working with Spring Lake 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, to make sure that maintenance is done.
I can tell you even as recently as about 3 weeks ago, it was a very collaborative effort to attempt to jet back the line. We have a jet back, the county has equipment. This has yielded since Sandy, what I have to say is a very collaborative effort amongst the towns, amongst our DPWs, even amongst our engineers. So, you know, what has come out of the storm, and largely part of being a local that you all voted on, is that we do have a governing capacity to work together on the lake. So I do believe, I cannot change the statement that, yes, Spring Lake owns that lake, they own the majority of that land. But yes, it is a very collaborative effort.
I think that's a question of our attorney, if that's okay. Sorry, please. You know, right now, we do work on Spring Lake, and that's a good thing. If I'm a resident in that area, that's a good thing too. However, future mayors and councils may not work together. The VAs may not work well. The engineers may have a problem with each other. Could we legally, if we approach Spring Lake, could we legally, for lack of a better phrase, purchase ownership of the outflow pipe itself? So we're not buying land necessarily in Spring Lake, but purchase ownership of the outflow pipes, because we're the ones who basically own the problem, and they own the solution. And again, while it's really wonderful that we're working on it now, you know, for future mayors and councils, you know, if we actually, the borough owned it, and then agreed to maintain it, you know, we'll be responsible for it, but that way, we always know that, you know, it'll be addressed, as opposed to, I'm not saying we're not addressing it, but as opposed to someone who doesn't have the same challenges we have with flooding. Could we approach it as something we would do?
Purchasing would be an actual physical structure of pipe, or would it be a service?
I guess the pipe itself, and I don't know if we'd have to get a right of way,
Right, exactly.
Kind of access agreement.
an access agreement.
Sure. I'll bring it up with Mr. Vermont and see what he thinks, but there's no reason why we couldn't do that.
Okay. Does the council, can I get enough?
Yeah, just in case down the road, someone says you can't be involved, can't help, you don't touch it,
Right.
you know.
I can tell you, I think from an administrator's perspective and how challenging these conversations have been with FEMA, with DEP, with funding mechanisms, I think that would do a lot to de-murk the water, for lack of a better expression, about ownership. Murk a word. I just made it a word.
Yes.
And there's
De-murking the
no
water.
Google that.
law in place that we can't own something that big.
No,
That's what-
my knowledge.
Mr. Washington doesn't believe that there's a legal hindrance. Obviously, they could just tell us no. But I think it's worth approaching them and say, listen, we'll take the financial responsibility. We'll take all the responsibility of maintaining it, cleaning it, you know, we just need access and have our toes on smelling soil.
Yes.
One question, what is listed somewhere, NFIP?
National Flood Insurance
Councilwoman's a lucky person, that she doesn't know what the NFIP is.
There's so many acronyms.
Unfortunately, there are so many people that know what that is.
LOL, OMG,
And sometimes they refer to it as SHI.
all these acronyms. Thank you. TX.
Any other questions or? Good, Council. All right, I'd like to ask maybe one or two or three folks that live in the area to come up here, if you want to come up, and just, if there's anything you want to ask, particularly of the BA of the engineer, driving this process, or even Director Campbell. So if there's any questions you may have of them, or we have a legal question as well, but just name and address for that.
Sure. Peter Marlowe, 300 North Boulevard in Belmar. Just before I trip. I made a timeline of the construction from 1950 to supplement what the following years. I don't mean to correct Colleen about anything, but one thing that you said in there, and one thing that she said there were 2 pipes there before a bypass pipes.
This one.
Before.
The other said,
I think I said two.
But your suggestion might be well taken. You can take 2, and I like to keep 2, and nobody needs it. It's more complicated.
we buy all 4.
It's more complicated than that, because you have to take out the sand. The sand buries out the portion next to the ocean. That was part of the DEP requirement. It makes no sense to me, but that's what they said had to happen.
I know, but again, if our DPW is permitted access, our DPW would move that sand out of there very quickly.
I watched it. I gave Colleen a day-by-day photographs of the construction of the 24-inch, and I apologize for correcting again, it's PVC pipe, not government, for the new stuff, which will be connected to, I'm not sure if it's a cast, there's still a piece of cast iron that's out there, maybe even one that's piece that's held together in the ocean. That one last piece still hasn't been done by the contractor, Walter Marine Construction. Their ties filled them 3 weeks ago, and they supposed to come back either this week or next. The outfall head, as I indicated in the presentation, was modified in 2 ways by Spring Lake. SMRSA, you mentioned before, SMRSA came up with the idea after the flood, when they thought they controlled the destiny of all the pipes there. Came up with an idea that they should modify the head of the outfall pipe by lowering the weir, which I'm sure you understand, and Randy would understand as well. But in addition, they cut out of the concrete north and the south side to increase the capacity. SMRS's people indicated that they could triple the capacity of the 24-inch pipe. That's why the lake is low right now, because they finally got it working right. As Mike Campbell told me, Belmar knocked a hole in the pipe after the storm because it was full of sand. It wasn't doing anything, so they had to leave the pressure on it. Originally, there was a stream there. That's what's in my old history of the world. It went out near where the posts are at the entrance gate of Spring Lake. And that had a bridge. The bridge collapsed back in the early 50s, according to my former neighbor, Rocky Metro, who's long dead. He was the building inspector in Belmar for 17 years. So when the bridge went, they put in the pipes. As Colleen said, Spring Lake has been determined by the New Jersey Department of DEP to be the owner of the pipe. Spring Lake eventually just capitulated on that. So there's some interesting issues that could have been argued they didn't say the owner. But Belmar, the county and Spring Lake are determined to be the owners of Ocean Avenue, which performs a dam, or generates a dam. The dam letter, I'm sure you're familiar with it, you saw that. Spring Lake took that responsibility, and they did the analysis of whether the dam would collapse or not, or whether it was functioning properly. Again, the history of the world is in all this good stuff. But my final point is a simple one. What we need. Mr. Calvarez prepared the 2 hazard mitigation requests. as you know also, when the boardwalk was designed, he proposed, or I think his firm proposed steel sheeting and sand dunes. FEMA said you can't have that because that's an improvement. I understand steel sheeting would be difficult to put in now that the boardwalk is installed. You've got some other appliances around it, appurtenances. But an engineered sand dune, there's no price for just the engineered sand dune without this steel. I request that that be at least considered because as we were here at the same room when the people for the beach replenishment project were here, we asked them, could you, I asked, you steal sand from the replenishment if a storm comes? They said, no, the legal term is borrow. You borrow sand. I don't know how much, and Belmar has 2 bulldozers that we obtained through the captain of the police department, and Spring Lake has 2 bulldozers and 2 excavators. So we can move, a lot of sand can be moved. To put in temporary sand dunes if necessary, but an engineered sand dune, I don't know how, that's what I request as part of this meeting tonight. We at least give consideration to at least putting a cost estimate on what an engineered sand dune all by its own would cost.
We did that last year.
That was $7 million, that included the steel sheeting.
Yeah.
If you didn't have the steel sheeting, which I don't think you can put the steel sheeting in, I don't need to argue with this technology at this point, now that the boardwalk is in.
Sure, I think it's still.
Probably good.
Yes.
Good.
The benefits of just dunes with an engineered dune without steel sheeting, that is almost as good?
If you look back at what happened over at Bradley Beach had an engineered dune, and they had a timber sheeting behind it. If you look at what happened during Sandy, and again, Sandy was a very large storm, the dune was gone. It helped ish, I guess. There was some value to it, but it did not stop Sandy. It would help on some other smaller storms, sure. An engineered dune in itself is, of course, of great value. The Army Corps has criteria for how large they recommend these dunes, which is very large. I believe they're actually putting in the dunes of this size in Lavalette right now.
Because your design was like the height of the boardwalk with the steel sheeting.
With the steel sheeting, the steel sheeting was acting as taking the energy from the wave of the storm surge. We were utilizing steel sheeting for that.
I will tell you, and I think you were here, Governor Christie was here, he had the DEP commissioner with him, and they went through all the towns from Seabright down to Cape May, along the beach front, which ones were going to have beach replenishment, which ones were going to have dunes, which ones were going to have both dunes and beach replenishment. Belmar is not on the DEP list for it.
That's what the people on the desk from DEP said. Commissioner said just the opposite, which was a mistake. He said the dunes are going to go up to Sandy Hook.
They're going to be intermittent between Sandy Hook and Cape May. So some towns like Lavalette will get it, but that means maybe Lavalette doesn't get beach replenishment. So there's, from my understanding, there's 2 ways to look at to mitigate against future storm surges. Go wider or go higher. So if you look at the dunes that really worked, you're talking 10, 12 feet.
More like 18.
18, 20 feet.
That's a large dune.
They work, you got to do plannings, but you're talking drastically changing the
People object to losing reviews and then, the access is difficult.
True, because you have to make them handicap accessible, which means you have to have ramps that, you have to have very long ramps to go with those.
I understand. Again, the reason I requested 2 meetings back that this be on the agenda is so it would be addressed. People from Spring Lake, Brian Benson in particular, have been unbelievably cooperative. I'm sure the company was great. But I'd like to at least review those 2 hazard mitigation requests that Paul Collery put together, update them in light of what has happened. Your suggestion about maybe, I'm a property to Big Bull, taking 2 of the bypass pipes. Everybody has a piece of the action in that regard. At least the proposal this raises something for consideration. Then, I'm not trying to make this a harsh argument, but in terms of allocation of funding that has been provided to the people at the Silver Lake. You put in a new water line there across the main street, new drain line, and you put over $400,000 to replenish and do all the kinds of good stuff for Silver Lake. According to Mike Campbell, last year you spent $1,800 for putting in some bushes and some rocks in 2 planting areas on the Belmar area of Lake Como. This year you put in mulch, and on 2 separate occasions you had maintenance. DPW people come down, chop down one limb on a tree, and put in mulch, and also just do a little bit of cleanup. If we were not getting our fair share, at least I'll say that for me, at our town. I'm not screaming, I'm not shouting, I'm just saying a little more attention to our problems is really needed, and the flooding brings it to the fore. Nobody likes the flooding. If we mitigate the flooding through some engineering concept, that's what we're seeking. Thank you for your attention. Anybody have any questions?
I have a question. Forget the dunes for a second, forget the landscaping. What Silver Lake, or what Spring Lake is doing with the new pipe, with the pump plants, does that satisfy your worry at night a little bit? I mean, does it help?
I'm afraid I've talked to too many people who say that it doesn't meet the 100-year storm. The engineer types. I like it when the lake is low, but it's like the time that the county pulls the pump out. The lake was overflowing the curb. It was, it didn't cause any damage, but it just like it was major all over again. The beginning of that is hard to get out of your psyche. But like Mike Ruppel, vice versa, these people say that